All right, everyone, I'm excited to introduce you to my next guest, writer, director, producer, created George Davis Rules. Good advice, a huge resume. I can't wait to dive into it. Welcome to the show, Norma Safford Vela. How are you?
Ah, I am well, thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, it's great to have you on the show. Your amazing background started as a writer, executive producer, showrunner. How did you decide that this was your path in life? How did you break into the business?
I have a very unusual path, I think, because I did not start out wanting to be a writer. I was going to be a set designer, and that's my degree is in scene design, technical production, lighting design, and costume design. So I came to Los Angeles with my husband, who was going to be a movie star, and I was going to be an art director. But they didn't let women in the union at that point. The art directors union. They were just starting to allow one or two women in. So I gave up on that. I happened to type 95 words a minute. And at that point, that was a big deal because we were still typing and using cut and paste and whiteout. They didn't have computers yet for shows. And so I got a lot of jobs just typing for writers. And that's
95 words a minute is a lot. Do you play piano?
No, I don't. I wish I could, but no, I started typing for court reporters and lawyers when I was 16. And that's how I paid my way through college.
I think the greatest thing my dad ever did is in high school, he insisted that my brother and I take typing, which
Yes.
and the reason I asked about the piano is I was pretty good at it, but my brother was a master at piano and he could type like 70 plus words a minute just because he could move his hands like that. I bet you would have been
Yeah.
amazing at piano, Norma.
I have giant hands. I have man hands and I can stretch an octave and a half on a piano, but I can't play. I have no understanding of music. Although I finally am teaching myself to play the ukulele. You can see five of them behind me.
Oh,
So that's
there you
I
go.
figured
See, I knew it. I knew it was the music.
Yeah, I insisted my kids have musical training when they were growing up, and both my grandkids are playing piano now. So I wish I had learned to play, but I never got to.
So it sounds like when you were starting to break into the business, it wasn't as open and welcoming to women as men.
Yes.
What were some of those early challenges as you made your way onto the writing set of St. Elsewhere and Slap Maxwell and all those? What were some of the kind of strifes and things that you had to deal with as a woman making her way in this profession?
St. Elsewhere particularly was like a college boys' dorm because it was all these smart guys that had been to university and studied writing and knew everything. And they were all smarty pants. And it was fairly abusive and misogynistic for the women. Simultaneously, I was treated like a little sister there. I was protected. Bruce Paltrow kept me employed year round, which was unusual. Mark Tinker got health insurance when I was pregnant while I was there, and I wasn't entitled to it as a secretary. Tom Fontana gave me the chance to write and taught me to write. And one of my best memories, I have a couple of great memories from there and some many horrible memories, but one of my best was just realizing that I could write. I was sitting with Tom at the word processor, which was a brand new thing. I was the only one at MTM who had been trained to use a dedicated word processor, and it was a big deal. And so Tom would sit beside me and dictate the script to me. And he said a line of dialogue, and I didn't type it. I just sat there for a minute to wait for him to reconsider maybe making that line better. And he looked at me and he said, "What?" And I said, "That's what you want me to type. Okay." And he said, "Oh, you think you can do better?" And I said, "I would do this." And he said, "Yeah, that is better. Write that." And so I started getting fancy ideas. And then I was allowed to be the person who communicated most with the medical advisor. So I got to write medical dialogue. And then I was also the one who poured through the Lancet, the Harvard Medical Journal, and the New York Times science section, medical section, looking for story ideas, medical story ideas, not emotional ones. But that's how I learned. And Tom taught me so much and gave me my chance.
That's amazing. And all because you could type.
Yeah.
But
Funny
that was
part,
like the bridge that then opened up.
yeah, the human resources lady literally took my resume, tore off the bottom where it said special skills, types 95 words a minute, took away all my education, all my experience, and handed me that little piece and said, take that over to Bruce Paltrow and you'll get the job.
Nice. So you went from fixing his lines to actually writing full scripts, right? For St. Elsewhere?
Yeah. I only got to write a couple of scripts for the show. They were not at that point yet welcoming women on staff.
Did you then use that experience to pivot to the next opportunity? Is this where you start falling in love with the idea of writing? Like, oh, not only
Yeah,
can I
well,
write, I can type it faster than everyone else. So I have that advantage.
yes, that was a real advantage, and there's a story about that later. Yeah, I worked on the show for I think 4 years. I got pregnant with my son at that point, and also was maybe going to be divorcing my husband. And so the idea of earning a decent living instead of $450 a week really appealed to me. And Bruce Paltrow expected everyone on the staff to want to progress, to want to be a writer or a director or a producer. And that was the only reason you were there working for him. And so he gave myself and Jorge Zamacona the opportunity to write a script together. We could split a script. And it was horrible. It was an awful script. And yet he gave us both another chance. And then after several years, I was just really unpleasant to have around at that point because I wasn't getting hired as a story editor. I was teaching the new story editors how to write the show, and I got resentful. And so Tom, so that I could go get other work, I could get unemployment, and he gave me $5,000 to start. And he called anyone he knew that could help me. And so I was able to get an agent, and I was able to get 2 staff job offers. And one was for Spencer for Hire, which I loved that show. I loved the books, and I got hired on that show.
It was your next kind of big one that you were at then, writing
It was,
episodes?
yeah. I did get another freelance script between now and then for a show that never really made it to the air, but that was fun. So I did get other assignments before that, but that was my first staff job. And it was wonderful. Juanita Bartlett was the executive producer, and it was just terrific. We were based at the Warner Brothers lot.
And you're a writer and you're writing and you're entrenched. Do you get to know Robert Urich or Avery Brooks? How do you get to know the characters and the stories and the actors to then create the words and the scenarios that can best capitalize on their talents and the direction of the show?
On that particular show, we had the advantage of the book series by Robert Parker. But we had the disadvantage of the actors all being in another state across the country, and we didn't get to go there. So I did finally meet Robert and Avery, and that was fun. I did get to go at the end. And I really focused on Hawk. He was my guy, and I wanted to write his dialogue. And so I just studied all the other scripts that they had for the show and studied him in the books and tried to make him sound as human and compassionate as possible.
That's awesome. At what point now are you getting a reputation as like a hot writer? Because as I look at your IMDb, it seems where your first producer writer opportunity comes from Roseanne. Is that?
Yes.
And what kind of in these early ones led to, did you know Roseanne or did she just notice the work you've been doing? And then, or did you start to create a reputation that kind of moved you in that direction for that opportunity?
I went from Spencer for Hire. I had my daughter. I was pregnant then, so I was on maternity leave. And while I was on maternity leave, the show got canceled. So there was no show to go back to. I had met Jay Tarsis at St. Elsewhere because he was on the MTM lot at the time. He was friends with Bruce and Mark, and he would come in all the time. And he was always nice and kind to me and funny. And Bethany Rooney she was a associate producer on St. Elsewhere. She was working on Days and Nights of Molly Dodd. And my other friend, Elena Rada, who is another writer, producer, she was also working with Jay on Days and Nights of Molly Dodd. But Beth showed me the tape for Slap Maxwell Story, and I liked that show better. I was crazy for that show, not for Molly. But I did write an episode of Molly Dodd, and I begged Jay to let me write for Slap Maxwell Story. And my sample script I gave him was 3 pages of a Spencer for Hire where I had written funny dialogue for Hawk. and that's what he hired me based on. So Russ Woody and I wrote the last 9 episodes, and we were there on set day to day because Dabney and Jay did not get along very well. And then that show got canceled. Then I went to work for Alan Zweibel on a show called The Boys, which had a bunch of major old-time comedy guys on it. And he had hired Bob Weiskopf and Bob Schiller. And they were heroes of mine. So I got to work with them briefly. But it was a horrible experience. I was bad at the show. I was not funny. And at that point in time, Jeff Harris, who was executive producer of Roseanne, called Bob Weiskopf and said, I need a chick. I need a girl writer over here. Do you know anybody? And Bob Weiskopf said, we have a girl over here. She's not very funny, but she's a good writer. Because Bob and I had fights over different jokes over the time I was there, and he would make me cry, and then he would send me flowers. So we had a good relationship ultimately. So I went over and met with Jeff Harris and Danny Jacobson, and I got hired there. And it wasn't based on anything but Bob Weiskopf saying I could write.
I did find an article by Vulture magazine that listed the greatest TV writer rooms ever. And it lists one of your seasons as one of the strongest staffs. That was pretty cool.
That's interesting.
Season 2 and 3 staff. And then the other interesting thing I found about Roseanne was a book called Stealing the Show, which quoted you as talking about how when Tom Arnold came on board, they wanted you to teach him how to write. And there was perhaps some internal strife with him becoming part of the team.
Tom tried to take a swing at me one day because we were rewriting his scripts completely. And Danny wasn't there that day, so Tom felt safe trying to hit me. And I called security and had him removed from the building, and we had his offices moved to the soundstage, so he wasn't allowed around us anymore. So I did not get along well with Tom. I initially got along really well with Roseanne, but Tom came in and he was an abusive control freak. And he convinced her to fire her sister, fire her manager, fire her publicist. It was horrible. I felt bad for her.
Yeah, I remember just being a person watching Entertainment Weekly and all that kind of stuff during the whole, when they got together. It was like a powder keg of, it seemed like it was just crazy. All right, so you were at the front lines of that. So it's funny, like someone can take a swing at you. Not funny, but it's that, and then and we'll just move his office today. That would be a whole different ending. Right? So you'd have been taken to jail and removed completely. And so how did you work through that? Roseanne was like one of your, I'm just going by your IMDb, was your first like long-term, like you wrote 24 episodes, now you're co-producer. What is being co-producer and writer? What is that? What's co-producer exactly? How would you define that?
I would define it in that case as a way to not pay me as much because they could give me a title and trade for income. And I was happy to take it because I was grateful to work. I was a woman trying to work in television. So I was happy to get what I got. In the case of Roseanne specifically, it was Danny Jacobson and myself in a room doing the final rewrite of every script. We did the final pass just with the two of us. We didn't have a writer's room. Danny didn't like it. He got frustrated with people really easily. And again, this was where my typing came in because I had a computer at that point, and I said, I can type as fast as you can talk. So if you just want to sit in a room and dictate the script to me, we'll get it done that way. So that was a lot of it. And then we would fight over the stories a lot and scream and yell at each other a lot. And that was what went into the script, was our disagreement over every issue.
It ended up being really a huge success, that original run. The other interesting thing I found while digging around is that you were also wrote on a Dutch version of Roseanne. I don't know if I'm going to pronounce this right. AAF. I don't know how to.
Oh, I think that they're required to give you credit for that because they used the Roseanne scripts that I wrote, not that I worked with them. I did work with Russian writers, but I didn't work with Dutch writers.
Oh, so you got credit because they used your scripts to adapt it. I didn't even know there
Yes.
was any adaptations of this. So usually you always
Yeah.
hear it's an American show is a version of a British show. I know you don't hear a lot about, oh, this one was moved over into these other markets. I got you. So you get credit and probably additional income when they expand these and use your words in other countries. That's interesting. Okay.
Yeah. I take it.
All right, that's cool. Was Roseanne, other than bringing Tom Arnold in and creating a very hostile environment, did she give opportunities to women? Did you feel it was still an opportunity, even though it was hostile? And then eventually, I assume, what was the straw that broke the camel's back, and you had to leave, like you couldn't even take it anymore? I'd imagine at some point.
Roseanne liked to give the impression that she was supportive of women, but she was in fact not. She would call producer meetings, and I would be the one producer not invited to the meeting. And I confronted her about it. And I said, if you want a woman's voice in the show, if you want a woman producer in the show, you need to invite me to the meetings. You need to include me. And so we had a little confrontation about that. And I just believed in standing up to her for her to live up to the values that she was saying she had. She did bring in other women writers on staff and brought in some interesting people, but she was not necessarily supportive of women at that point.
Got it. So, what was the end for you at Roseanne?
The end for me was that Danny and I both got fired. Um, the show was number one, and it was number one in part because of our writing. And that was the decision that they made. They had already Jeff Harris had decided to leave, and he was replaced with Jay Daniels. And I think Jay was part of the decision to move us along. But the reward was that we got to create another show together. Danny and I did. And that's how we got Davis Rules.
Okay. All right. So then you create Davis Rules. Davis Rules is with Randy Quaid and Jonathan Winters, right?
Yes.
And Bonnie Hunt. So that's an amazing cast. So I'd love to hear some stories about them. But how did you, when somebody gives you the opportunity, says, all right, you guys can create, all right, you guys rocking. We understand number one show, there's some stuff going on there, oil and water. They wanted you to leave. You got fired, but we're going to let you create a show. So is this an idea that you had? Was it based on when you were working together with Danny Jacobson? Was it something that you guys had talked about? What's the germ of this idea? Like, how do you create a show? Or do they hand you a show and go, here's our idea, make this a show?
It was a little bit of both. Marcy Carsey brought us in for the pitch to the network, and she said, we want to create a show about education. What do you think? And he said, great, I like it. Go do it. And that was how this show was sold, literally. We didn't know what we were going to do. It just needed to be about education. That was a passion of mine personally. And so I was very excited. They had Randy Quaid and Jonathan came in second, though. They had Jonathan first, I believe. And we had another guy in Randy's role, Gaylord Sartain. And he had I don't know whether it was drinking issues or emotional issues, but he was so frozen by Jonathan that we had to replace him. I was literally in the early shooting of the pilot, I was behind a screen whispering his lines to him so he could finish the scene. So that was horrible. He was a sweet man, but he couldn't do the part. And then we brought in Randy. And Randy was also challenging. He wanted to compete with Jonathan, which is impossible. It can't be done.
I imagine you just need to bask in that glow, and that Jonathan
Yeah.
Winters is probably a giving person in terms of sharing that. I think most people that good at improv are, but it's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And then we needed to just allow the deal that Jonathan had was he wasn't required to memorize lines. And so the way we wrote the script was we would give him a starting point and an ending point with ellipsis in between, and he could fill in the blank however he wanted. And he would fill in the blank differently with every take. But we still needed him to get back to that last point. And so that was really Bonnie Hunt's initial service for us. She had just come off of Grand, was the show she had been working on. And we loved her and brought her on as Dwight's sister. And she would feed Jonathan that last line that he needed to get back to. And he adored her. He absolutely adored her. And they were similar minds. So it worked out great.
Oh, that's awesome. And so you were basically Curb Your Enthusiasm before. Isn't that how that show worked? It's basically like start here, get here, figure it out. Were you on set when Jonathan Winters would be doing all this? How did you get anything done? I like you have 29 episodes. How did you get through even just the first one? It just seems like you without just cracking up.
We had a dedicated camera on Jonathan, for one thing. And that was really important because he was always performing. He was always looking somewhere or doing something or picking some shit up. And you wanted every second of that. And we also had, I think we did two separate shows. I'm trying to remember. It's been a while. I think we did a pre-tape show and then a live show. And we were on set for all of it. And he loved Danny Jacobson, loved him. And Jonathan was a childhood hero of mine. I had his albums from when I was a little girl. He used to come to the Tidelands Hotel and perform, and that's where I went swimming as a little girl. And we got into water fights with his kids. So I go way back.
That's really cool. This is an amazing cast. Giovanni Ribisi, Patricia Clarkston, Deborah Jo Rupp was in this also. So it's like this is a powerhouse cast you had. So that's awesome. And so did Randy Quaid kind of mellow out into the role and kind of meld over time with Jonathan Winters, or was it a kind of that spotlight issue the whole time?
I think there was always tension the whole time. I think Jonathan just saw him as not fun to play with. And John just liked to play. That's all he wanted to do was play. So it became difficult.
Got it. Awesome. All right. So Davis rules. And then from there, designing women. Is that where was that the next big project?
Danny and I co-created Good Advice for Shelley Long. And I did not want to work on that show. I had time issues. He was just married and I had two kids, and I wanted to work during the day and he wanted to work at night. And we just had different schedules, and it was time for us to break off a little bit. And so he went and did Good Advice. Michael Leeson took over Davis Rules and killed it. He didn't like the show to begin with. And so he changed it to try to make it what he wanted it to be, and it didn't work. The show that we created worked. Not that I'm bitter. And then I went to run the Torkelsons, which was with Michael Jacobs, and that was not fun. And I quit that show. I loved the show. I loved the cast. I'm still friends with the cast, but I would never work with Michael Jacobs in my life again.
What was the strife that drove you from that? Was there a specific incident? Did he try and hit you too, like Tom Arnold?
It was just, I don't really know what it was. It could have been incompetence on my part. It could have been arrogance on his part. I'm not sure. He was doing dinosaurs at the same time, and he just fell in love with this show. And so he would come and micromanage me. And that makes it really impossible to do your job. And so I said, here, you go have the show and you have fun with it. And he changed it again into a different show that ultimately failed.
People need to learn. Norma sets the bar, and change it.
I'm trying to remember, and I think from there I had been trying to work on Designing Women for a long time. I loved the show. I loved the cast. I tried to get freelance scripts, all kinds of stuff. And I think I was brought on as a consulting producer first.
Mm-hmm.
And Pam Norris was the showrunner, but she had stopped showing up for work, which was unusual. But I think it's because she was pregnant and didn't want people to know because it was a difficult situation for her. But the producers came in to me one day and said, okay, what are we doing next week? And I said, I don't know. Ask Pam and Linda. And they said, you're the person in charge now. And so that's what I became and it was just for part of that season. And then for the next season, they did make me an executive producer. And David Steinberg was not happy about that. He thought that he should have been made executive producer instead of me, which I can understand. He'd been directing for the show for a while and felt that he deserved it. But I got it instead, so he got mad. And it became very difficult.
Did he try and hit you?
Everybody does.
Everyone wants to take a swing at Norma.
Nobody's connected yet, though, because I'm from Texas. I jump.
You're too quick.
Yeah, exactly. I had two big brothers who used to beat me up, so I'm used to it. But yeah, that was a very challenging show. It was not fun, and I was deeply disappointed. Because again, David Steinberg had been one of my heroes. He had a joke that used the word moribund, and I worshiped him for that. And he conspired to get me fired and replace me.
Oh,
it's a sad story.
So, but besides the kind of internal drama and the shuffling of that, did you enjoy the scripts, and did you get to engage with Gene Smart or Annie Potts, Dixie Carter, Delta Burke? Like, where it's such an iconic cast at this point. Is there some high points of it? I know you had wanted to be there for so long, as you mentioned. Was there some storylines you wrote? You're like, I'm so proud of this. This is awesome.
I was proud of everything that we did. The Gene Smart was gone. Delta was gone by the time I got on there.
Okay.
And we had, shoot, I cannot remember Jan's last name now. I'm so sad. But yes. She was incredibly funny. That I think I enjoyed working with the writing staff more than anything else. We had a small room. It was Mark Brown and Dela Duke, and I'm still best friends with Dela Duke and Catherine Michon. And that was our staff. And we cranked scripts out like crazy and enjoyed every second of it. That was really fun.
Excellent. And then was George next, or how was George?
Yeah.
Did everyone who worked on that show get a grill? Did you get a grill?
No.
Was lunch breaks? Did everyone have to make food on the George Foreman grill? There's no
I'm not sure
that might have been before.
Yeah. That was I had a development deal with Columbia at the time, and I was trying to sell a 1-hour show. It was an autobiographical 1-hour show that I had sold to CBS, but then the guy I sold it to died. And that was the end of that. Yeah, it was horrible. But then they approached me with George. I'm from Houston too, and I loved boxing and I loved George. And I was like, immediately, yes. He was absolutely lovely person. He was really funny and just a delight to work with.
He looks like he'd be a character. Just him as the boxing guy is humorous to watch just in interviews and stuff. Like that was a fun show. So as executive producer, that's showrunner. That's the same thing as So in this, you get to what was this based on some of George's life, or was there a path that you had set and then they clicked George into it, or they had to deal with George, or how did that come about?
Yeah, Tony Danza's company had a deal with George, and I knew quite a bit about George's life and wanted to make it easy for him as an actor. So we surrounded him with a really great cast. Cheryl Lee Ralph was his wife, which was very wonderful. Anne Haney, I think that was her name, was the housekeeper, and she was wonderful. Yes, Juanita. And that's named after my grandma. And yeah, I try to get my family's names into shows whenever I can. The mother-in-law in the Torkelson is named after my mother, Bootsy. So it's fun. Dwight is my brother from Davis Rules.
It's awesome.
But yeah, you sneak them in just to honor your family. But I wanted to go back to education again. And George's wife was a teacher and she dealt with troubled kids. And George thought he had the easy answer and he could fix everything himself. And we had a multiracial cast. And I was really specific on casting according to race because we had one little boy, one character was half Mexican. And we made sure we got a half Mexican kid.
That's good. That's important. Diversity, and that's amazing. That's probably way ahead of its time in terms of thinking that way too, because we're going back many years right now. And then Cheryl Lee Ralph used that education background and brought that to Abbott Elementary. She's there now. Cool. Awesome. All right. All right. This is fun. All right. And then you were on with Sabrina the Teenage Witch, co-executive producer there. Fun. Carolyn Ray. All was that good?
It was a very fun show. The writing staff was fun. The actors were fabulous. That was an early guest role for Bryan Cranston. So that was fun. We had Raquel Welch, rest in peace.
Yes.
And just able to get some really fun guest stars. Blondie, Penn and Teller, trying to remember who else. Just a ton of people. And on-set magic, really fun because Nell Scoville wanted to do as much in-camera magic as she could.
Magical show. Not to jump around, but I was working with Pamela Anderson. You did a lot with VIP.
I respect and admire Pam a lot. She did not like me. I don't know why. I don't know what I did wrong, but I was not her fan. No, the other way around. Which way is it? She didn't like me. So I just wrote a lot and was on set when I had to be and did my job politely and quietly. But boy, was she smart. We would write her huge chunks of dialogue and she never missed a beat with it. She was always professional and smart and knew her cameras and knew her moves and knew the other actors' stuff. And I remember watching her in rehearsal one day and she's saying her lines. And I think we had Tom Jones as a guest. And one of her children came up behind her on set and she just reached back behind her and hugged the little boy closer to her and kept doing her performance like nothing had changed and was fully present as a mom and an actress both. It was really impressive.
Very cool. She didn't take a swing at you, did she? No, I'm just kidding. I don't know. Somehow that became a funny thread. I know no one actually. Just Tom Arnold. So is it hard? Tom. You don't get along with the star and like it's her vehicle, and because you were there at least a couple of years, right? And you wrote a lot of episodes. Yeah. Was it just a tough cookie on the set? What is it, Norma?
I had a reputation for being able to work with very difficult people. That was Jay Daniels' reputation, why he was brought on to Roseanne, because he could work with difficult people. And at that point, Tony Danza was a difficult person, and I worked with him. The Designing Women was packed. That was a cast full of difficult people. And you were polite and professional and did your job. And you just don't engage with them in an emotional way. I was sad that Pam didn't like me because I really respected her and admired her. And I thought she was really funny. So yeah, you just do your job.
Cool. And then connected with Bonnie Hunt again on Life with Bonnie. Was that coincidence or did Bonnie bring you back?
Bonnie brought me back. She was an extremely loyal person. And she, like Sam Dinoff, was on the writing staff that year. And she did that out of respect for older writers. And that's where I was at that point. I was an older writer. I had passed 40, I think. And yeah, she brought me back for that. And she was really careful about who she trusted. And she did not trust a lot of people. Oh, but I do have a good Bonnie Hunt story that relates to Roseanne. When we were on Roseanne, Joss Whedon was a baby writer. And he was also frustrated that Danny and I were rewriting his scripts. And I went and talked to him one day and I said, you just need to accept that this is reality. This is what happens. Your work will always be rewritten by someone who's above you until you're the person above everybody else. Is there something else you could work on that's your work? And he said, well, I have this vampire idea. I said, great, work on that. Go do that. So then years later, I'm on the Bonnie show and Doug Ellin is one of the writers. And I told him the story because he was also frustrated that his scripts were not getting used. And I said, let me tell you the story about Joss Whedon. Is there something else that you have that you want to work on? And he said, I have this other script. Maybe you could take a look at it and tell me if you think it's good. And we know what that was.
Oh, that's fine. Look at you. Entourage. I look at you inspiring all this. The vampire.
I just told them to get over their cheap selves and get to work. Go do the stuff they want to do. Right.
You said Joss Whedon was a baby writer. What does that term mean exactly in the hierarchy of a writing room?
He was a story editor, and it was his first professional job. So,
Oh.
and he was young. He had waist length hair, and he was just a little boy trying to write about this woman's family.
Who knew one day Buffy and the Avengers, oh yeah, I used to rewrite that Avenger guy scripts.
Were really good. They were well written scripts and slick and stuff, but they just didn't have what we needed maturity wise.
You needed to tweak it. So besides inspiring Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Entourage, any other hidden gems in there that exist now because of you, Norma?
I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
I don't mean to put pressure. Those two alone are incredible. So,
yeah. Those are like my Forrest Gump moments. I just happened to be there saying, go do that. That's all I did.
I don't know. Shit happens.
That's right. That's the story of my career, man. Shit happens.
Talk to me about what you're up to these days, Norma.
I am a retired old lady. I have circled back around to what I really wanted to do, which is to be an artist. And I have a little art business, and I'm opening a little store on my property in Maine. I live in rural Maine, and my son and daughter-in-law have a farm, and I take care of their two kids. And I do as little as humanly possible because I am old and lazy.
You've earned it, and you're living your dream, and that's amazing. I love that. That's great.
Yeah.
Any advice for any aspiring women out there breaking into the world of entertainment?
Just please God, we need more women writing and write from being a woman. Like that was one of the things I learned back on St. Elsewhere from Alfre Woodard was her character as a doctor came in and she was so different and couldn't figure it out. And the difference was she wasn't trying to be a man. And that was how I wrote as well. I didn't write trying to be a man or write like a man. And I wrote action stuff. I wrote fights and kids shows and all kinds of weird stuff. But I always wrote from the point of view of being female.
Norma, thank you so much for sharing all these amazing stories. Oh, wait, does your company have a website?
Tethermade.com is one of my little businesses. Yes.
Awesome. So everyone can check you out there.
Come see me in Maine.
For sure. Next time in Maine. I need to get out that way. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. I really appreciate it. Great stories. It was great going through your career with you.
Oh,
thank you.
Thank you.